everybody, my name is Scary Gamer and welcome back to a brand new video up on the channel. Today we're going from a top 50 to a top 5, just to make it a little shorter for you guys, by counting down my personal picks for the top 5 worst or even the less best album by bands I tend to enjoy or even love. This list wasn't very hard because, as much as I hate to say it, there are bands that I love out there that can kind of slip up and put out something I did really enjoy. Now, that's not saying that the whole discography from these bands are bad. That's not what this list is meant to be. This list is meant to be putting out just the bad inside of the good. So, as much as I'd love to say Korn and 3 Days Grace, my top 2 favorite bands of all time, are safe from this list, that's not the case, because even them, my top 2 favorite bands of all time, have put out some bad albums that are probably going to appear on this list. I should have pulled a spoiler alert. So without wasting too much time, let's just get into this, shall we? Starting off with our number 1 pick. Blink-182 has been a very fan favorite of mine. I love Blink-182 to death, but even I can't ignore the fact that for one of their very first albums, this album was boring to death, with not a lot to really get me really going back to the album in the first place, with no songs that I'm like, well, I really want to go back and listen to it. Not really. This album is a snooze fest, to be honest. I get a lot of punk fans really enjoyed this album, but for me, there's just not much to offer, and that's why I had to put it at number 5, because honestly, I don't remember anything about this album other than I never ever visited it. When it comes to 3 Days Grace, it is very hard to pick a bad album. As much as people might jump onto the idea that I'm going to pick some Matt Waltz albums, such as Human Race or even their latest album, The Outsider, I actually really enjoyed those albums a little more than I enjoyed this. I had to pick this album on the list because, well, for a couple of reasons. And starting with number 1, I gotta get the elephant out of the room. It's Adam Gontier's last album, one of the founding members, the lead vocalist for years of 3 Days Grace. The reason people fell in love with this band, including myself. Adam Gontier has such a has these powerful vocals, and unfortunately he departed ways. And this was his final album with the band, and just heartbreakingly, I had to include it on this list because of how much of a disappointment it is compared to everything Adam Gontier went through with their self-titled album 1X, Life Starts Now, and even his future stuff, his future projects with his newest band, Saint Sonio. That is good stuff, and then it came down to this. As much as I hate to say this album really sucked, it really did, because, well, it's Adam Gontier's final album, so you kind of expect them to be a little better and to have kind of a good farewell. Unfortunately, all they gave Adam Gontier was these radio-friendly hits mixed in with just awful, boring, ununique sounds. It really sucks to say this was Adam Gontier's final album, and it had to be on this list. This was a massive disappointment. As much as I love to say that, Adam Gontier didn't really leave music and he still continued to make music, 3 Days Grace has always been very important to me. That's why when he left and left this behind with him, it really, really sucked. So, yeah. Good job, 3 Days Grace, for making one of the worst goodbye albums you can ever imagine. Speaking of radio friendly, like I said, no matter how much I love a band, they are not safe from this list. This is probably one of the biggest disappointments I've ever listened to. Korn is one of the most successful
new metal, alternative metal, heavy metal bands out there. So when it came down to picking their worst album, it was kind of hard for me because even their dubstep album had some good hits. This album, all I can offer is the song Evolution, a single. Nothing else on this album really works. This is Korn trying to be radio friendly without all the original members and doing its absolute worst. If anybody from Korn is watching this, look into my eyes. Never make another radio friendly BS album like this ever again. This should not exist, however it does, and it had to make the list at number 3. I would put it at number 1, but we have a few more we gotta get through. So, let's talk about this one, shall we? When it comes to Korn, I really do understand their history and that they were struggling during this time with their departure, their founding drummer David Severa, and their really good guitarist Ed Welch. It was very hard for the remaining members of Korn to pick up the pieces and to keep going on, especially after a mixed reception of albums like Take a Look in the Mirror, and soon in the future even more mixed reception with albums like The Path of Totality. However, for this album, it sucked. It was Korn trying to be radio friendly, and it kind of didn't make any sense why they would go on a path like this. Yet they did, and it's number 3 on this list.
When it comes to number 2, we got Chapter 5 by Stained. Good God. It's been a while. Please tell me you guys got that reference. Chapter 5 by Stained is probably one of the worst albums I've ever listened to in my entire life. At least the second worst album I've ever listened to in my entire life. It is awful in so many ways. With a cringy opening that a preschool student could have made so much better, the song Running Away. How many bands have actually written a song called Running Away? Can we take a minute to just think for a second? You don't even have to be a fan of rock music to understand how many songs are out there about running away. Stain did exactly that, but somehow made it the worst song about running away I have ever listened to in my entire. Oh my god. I don't love Stained. They have a lot of problems with their songwriting, and some of their. Especially Aaron Lewis's vocals are just weird sometimes and kind of cringy. But I gotta say, I enjoy Stained, okay? I love 14 Shades of Grey and The Illusion of Progress. However, when it came to Chapter 5, an album that I actually built up because I enjoyed 14 Shades of Grey and The Illusion of Progress and Break the Cycle. God, what went wrong? I'm I'm crying of anger right now because I just cannot wrap my head around what went through their head when making this album. It is pure garbage. Stained. You had one job to make a good, at least a decent alternative metal album, and all you came out with in the end was this cringy, trying to be poetic, trying to be sad, trying to be get into your feelings, and all you came out with in the end was making me cry. Not because of how sad your lyrics are, but because of how awful your lyrics are. You have a couple good songs. Jesus Christ, I'm getting angry.
When it comes to pooping all over grumpy old Uncle Aaron Lewis's vocals, there's nothing I like more to do. His vocals are very whiny and bring down a lot of the band. All the band members of Stain bring something amazing to the table. I mean, I would kill to go see them live. I mean, just look at this video you're watching now. They are amazing. However, with Aaron Lewis leading it, this band has some major problems, and all those major problems are brought to light on their album Chapter 5. It is tone deaf boring Facebook mom torture. It is awful. Songs that you stereotypically hear on all your favorite emo albums, such as I'm Sad and Lonely, and Because My Girlfriend Broke Up with Me Because I'm Not Emo Enough. This album sucks so bad in so many massive ways that I cannot even cover them in this time that I have to cover it. So we're just going to leave it at this.
Coming into number one, I have no regrets. Limp Bizkit had to make the list. At number one, no exceptions. Limp Bizkit made the worst album I've ever even attempted to listen to. I I attempted this album. I went into it with an open mind because I enjoyed some of his work, especially on Chocolate Starfish and Significant Other. But when I went into this album, I literally just like thought to myself, what am I doing? What am I doing with my life? What am I doing here? Is there any point in making these videos? Is there any point in really like sitting here talking about music? Why am I listening to this music? What's the meaning of life? This album was pure garbage. It was worse than Stain's album at number 2. If you thought Stain was awful at lyrics, then you probably never listened to Limp Bizkit. And please, 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 for the safety of your ears, for the safety of loving rock music, please, I am not encouraging you. I'm not telling you. I'm literally telling you not to. The exact opposite. Do not listen to this album. This album will literally make you jump, backflip out your window. I literally have a window right here that I'm about to backflip out of. I won't, because I'm not listening to the album right now. Which, thank God, because this album, the only saving grace is a cover song. Faith was the only song on this album I enjoyed. This is number one we're talking about. Keep that in your mind.
You can all hate Chad Kroeger of Nickelback for all of his douchey things, but oh my god, has there never been a man I disliked more than Limp Bizkit's Fred Durst? Fred Durst has the same amount of writing as a 2-year-old. This album sucked. Don't get me wrong, I love Limp Bizkit because of how weird and over the top they are. I love Limp Bizkit because a lot of the band members have really good instrumentation, and you can tell they're actually trying. I mean, look at this video. They're actually trying to be awesome with their guitars and drums and basses and DJ's lethal turntables. However, when it comes to Fred Durst, it's a sinking ship. Never worked with Fred Durst. And unfortunately, this album was a massive, massive reason why you should never, ever be in Limp Bizkit. This album sucked, with its only good song being a cover song. A song that was already released and written. And it wasn't even that good to begin with. So in the end, it definitely belongs on number one, to say the least.